Hello, Sherlock fans, stay tuned as Martin Freeman and Mark Gatiss offer clues as to what's in store from the sociopathic sleuth of Baker Street in the forthcoming series. I'm joined in the studio by a trio of music experts who will be naming their albums of the year. Christmas lights as art with a report live from Mousehole Harbour in Cornwall, and how to animate a bear hunt.
We give briefings to the animators to tell them how we want the characters to act. Robin does some very detailed briefing, occasionally acting out the baby, acting out Max.
It's method animation.
It is.
As Michael Rosen's classic kid story, We're Going on a Bear Hunt, is adapted for television. I'll be talking to the animators Robin Shaw and Joanna Harrison later. Sherlock Holmes famously rose again after being apparently killed off by Arthur Conan Doyle at the end of his 1893 story, The Final Problem. But his resurrection in recent years has arguably been his most successful to date, thanks to the global success of Sherlock, which reimagines him as a 21st century detective, played by Benedict Cumberbatch, of course. After 3 series and a standalone episode on the first day of 2016, which became the most viewed programme of the last festive period, co-creators Stephen Moffat and Mark Gatiss turned once again to Doyle for inspiration for another 3-part series, which starts on New Year's Day with The Six Thatchers. Mark Gatiss, who also plays Holmes' brother Mycroft, came to Front Row earlier today, along with Martin Freeman, who plays Dr. John Watson. At the end of the standalone film, The Abominable Bride, Watson and his wife Mary were expecting a baby. According to reports, it's going to be a girl called Rosamond. So surely that's going to change the dynamic of the sleuthing double act.
It's a tricky one, I guess, for us, and, you know, even more so, I guess, for Mark and Stephen as the writers, of towing that line between giving freshness to something and moving the story along. But if you get too far away from what anchors you, it's no longer the thing, you know, because if you move too far away from what Sherlock and John are and what this animal is, people go, well, why have you changed it into Scooby-Doo or something? But, of course, you can't ignore the fact of if we do exactly the same thing we did in, you know, summer of 2010, people would be going, oh, this is a bit, you know.
And what clue can you give us? Because his first duty of care has always been to Sherlock, but of course now it is to Rosamond.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I felt really, in spite of what other protestations, I think as soon as John was with Mary, just realistically, that has to be your first duty of care, you know, because, you know, when you fall in love with somebody, that has to be your first priority.
Despite the fact she's been revealed to be a vicious assassin.
Yes, indeed, but, you know,
not vicious, just an assassin.
Just an efficient,
tiny
efficient assassin.
Yeah, she's a very good assassin. But given that was kind of resolved, you know, by the resolved-ish, that they'd sort of forgiven each other. Or
Let bygones be bygones.
It kind of, yeah. But if it then became a show about John and Mary's domestic life, that wouldn't really be the same show.
Right. Let's look at the title, Mark. The Six Thatchers. Of course, it always goes back to Doyle, to the source material. He wrote The Six Napoleons, which involve the plaster models, the busts of Napoleon being smashed systematically in some mysterious plot. You have the busts of Margaret Thatcher being smashed.
Yes, well, as I say in the episode, she's kind of become iconic, you know, and it follows some of the story quite closely because it's one of my favourites, and well, Steve and I both are favourites, so it was a natural fit for the story we wanted to tell with episode 1, it's a curious thing that she can have become like that. Although I'm now feeling nostalgic for Thatcher.
You knew where you were.
It's a period of stable politics which we haven't seen the like for of this year. So. It's a sort of nice joke, really, and anyone who knows the original story will know what we're referring to, but it's not, as the Mail is claiming, some sort of left-wing plot.
Toby Jones makes an appearance. We know that also as a new villain, a new nemesis, as Culverton Smith. Has he got anything to do with Moriarty?
Oh, gosh, as if we could tell you that, John. He's fabulous, Toby.
Moriarty's not... He's dead, but he's not gone.
He is dead, yes.
Dead,
we know we have to lie for a living on this show, but no one ever believes us when we tell the absolute truth, which is that he is dead. Moriarty is dead.
Yeah, but he lives on.
He lives on somehow, doesn't he? Yes. As Sherlock says, of course he's dead. More importantly, I know exactly what he's going to do next.
Yeah, I mean, deeply frustrating for any journalist talking to Mark Gatiss or to Stephen Moffat. Is it frustrating for you, Martin, as an actor? I mean, because you want to know how your life is going to pan out, whether you have to set aside time to play Dr. John Watson again. How much will he tell you?
I mean, I think they tell us what we need to know, to be absolutely honest. I mean, I'm not pathological about finding everything out, you know. I mean, because I'm quite happy. Like, if I didn't trust them, then I would think, Christ, what are they going to do now? But I think, well, they love the source material. They love doing the show. So far, they've been pretty good. It's like, well, fine. If you want to tell me 2/3 of it and not all of it, then I'll find out the next third when I need to. I'm all right with it. Really.
And you continually return to the source material. Have you been through all of the stories? Do you think? Now, have you taken at least some element from every story that's been written?
Oh no, God! I mean, there's 56 short stories, 4 novels, and we've really barely scratched the surface. We've just sort of done the big famous stuff, but there's always, I mean, genuinely, if you get stuck, go back to Doyle. It doesn't even have to be the story you think you want to adapt. There's a beautiful little story called The Case of Identity, which I've used 3 separate bits of now. It's a very delicate story that you can't really dramatise because it only works on paper. It's about someone in disguise, But there are so many little fragmentary things. And I remember being stuck on something. I just read that again for pleasure, and I found the solution just by reading that.
And you're filing those ideas away and think of those are future episodes then, because obviously some people will be looking at these 3 episodes, and the last one is The Final Problem. The Final Problem was his original last story before he was forced by popular demand to resurrect Sherlock after he plunged him apparently over the Reichenbach Falls. Again, do people presume that The Final Problem will chime with Doyle's Final Problem, that the stories will have some kind of similarities?
2 things there, really, to answer your question. One is, obviously, there's a great deal of pleasure to be had from... And episode 3 is fundamentally about making people go, oh my God. So calling it The Final Problem immediately sends a message like, here we go. But also, The Final Problem was Doyle's final problem until he had to bring it back. So there's final and there's final. Who knows?
Yeah. It's interesting, isn't it? When people think of when they first saw you on screen or first noticed you on screen, possibly as part of The Office, and Mark with League of Gentlemen, there were, 2, 3 series of League of Gentlemen?
3,
there were 2 series of The Office.
Yeah.
There is the idea, when you think of Fawlty Towers and some of the series from the past, that less is more. And people remember those series. They were so great because they didn't outstay their welcome.
Without question.
Oh, yeah.
Without question,
Does that, and do you bring that to bear when you're thinking about the long term?
Of course, it's always an issue there because, and actually, weirdly, particularly now that the American shows are starting to follow more of a European model, 6s and 10s, something that you just wouldn't have done.
Rather than the 13s, which was the standard.
Or even,
25.
absolutely. I remember very early on meeting some American producers who love the League of Gentlemen. They literally say, why can't you make like 38? It's like, Jesus. Well, there's a reason. So because of that it's a constant thought. Of course it is, because we take a long time between them. People love the suspense, and then it's kind of gone in less than a fortnight. It's like a sort of summer cloud. It comes and goes. One thing, not trying to outthink Arthur Conan Doyle, but he never understood to his dying day why people loved Sherlock Holmes more than anything he did. And I think Stephen and I are completely sanguine about that. And that is actually a bit of a bonus. It's like, we're going to accept this because it is a phenomenon. We've all, thank God, had big successes elsewhere, but this show is very particular. For some reason, everything just clicked. The casting, the writing, the timing. It's just one of those things, and I don't think we'll ever see its like again for us.
Yeah.
So you don't want to blithely sort of go, oh well, that's it then. But as you say, there's also a very cogent argument. It's like, well, let's just leave it there.
Mark Gatiss and Martin Freeman. The 4th series of Sherlock begins on New Year's Day, BBC One, 8:30. And The Final Problem, the season finale, can also be seen in cinemas nationwide on Sunday the 15th of January.